And on that, Dublin versus Kerry, Anthony Moyles is joining myself and Adrian in the studio. Morning, Anthony, how are things?
Morning, Shane. Have you recovered?
Recovered.
Yes.
Fully recovered and recuperated. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm okay. Look, it's
the disappointment. Cut steep.
Listen.
It's the final that, to be fair, and I think even Monaghan and Derry fans who lost the semi-finals can accept this. It is the final that all the neutrals wanted. Certainly the final that the Dubs and Kerry fans wanted. But it's perilously perched, isn't it? It's hard to differentiate between them.
Yeah, it is. And hopefully just nothing happens on the day to kind of take out one of the big players. And you'd hope that everyone is kind of fit and healthy and ready to go. It is perilously perched, and I keep I flip-flop during the week whether I think it's going to be a Dublin win or whether I think it's going to be a Kerry win. For all my Kerry supporters out there,
all watching this morning.
Growing numbers. I'm still backing them all the way, as I have been for the last number of weeks.
Vague amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I
can't quite remember. Yeah, no, I think it's all about the matchups, really. It's all about the matchups, and that is going to be, I think, the Bugler loss for Dublin, if he is out, causes a bit of a headache for Desi. There's no doubt about that, because I think he fulfills a role that is quite difficult to fill for Dublin in this current setup,
which is direct running.
Correct. Yeah, it's that direct running from 11, and I think more so against this Kerry team because of Morley's positioning and the way he drops back in and he protects that D. You do need a direct 11. Yeah. You need someone who's just willing to go, turn and go. Yeah. So actually I think people are calling for Kilkenny. I don't think he'll start Kilkenny. Right. I think he'll leave Kilkenny, because Kilkenny, I think it's been long kind of discussed about the fact that Kilkenny is quite lateral at times. He controls the ball very well. He's very, very good at coming on and basically taking the sting out of a game and being able to control it, being able to kind of work things out. But as far as, the first 35, 40, 45 minutes where you need someone to take that ball at 11, as I say, to go direct down the gut of Kerry, I think he could switch things around with. I think he tried that with Pascal, and I wouldn't be surprised. I know Pascal didn't go well the last day, but there's always a bit of a come down after a high, so I wouldn't be surprised if he moved Pascal to 11 and try to get his pace from there. I don't think he'll start O'Dell, albeit O'Dell has that pace and he kind of comes on like a McMenamin type figure. So I think there's going to be a little bit of deck chair shifting, but I think ultimately what it'll come down to is those matchups, and then that the bench, the two benches in the last 10-15 minutes.
So a lot has been said about the Dublin bench. I've been chatting to Kerry people in the last week or so, and maybe some respect hasn't been thrown on the Kerry bench in a similar vein to the Dubs. We all know that the quality you saw it against Monaghan, like the quality coming off that Dublin bench is insane, but Kerry's benches and all that, like even Stephen O'Brien was someone that probably people didn't expect much of, but he comes on at half time and changes the game in many ways.
Yeah, he was unbelievable the last day, and he did change the game for them, and I think he brought an energy, he brought an enthusiasm, he brought an intensity that just wasn't there in that kind of half back, half forward, certainly the half forward line. So again, Jack O'Connor's sitting there and saying, well, do I start him? And that's a difficult thing to do again, because Stephen is probably, he's, I think he's more of an impact player now. So do you go with Spillane and say, listen, we're just going to go with a fella who can just give me everything for 35, 40 minutes in around the middle where Dublin are obviously strong. I don't think it is as strong. I don't think the Kerry bench is as strong as Dublin. There's no one really on that bench who's scaring the daylights out of me, to be honest with you. Obiuglig will probably come on. Yeah. Tony Brosnan will probably come on. And Brosnan has been hit and miss this year. He could do something absolutely brilliant, but he could also just fade into the background as well. And I'm not, there's no one else really who's kind of saying to me, wow, that's someone who can really take this game from me. So O'Brien, there's probably your first 3 or 4 subs there. Whereas Dublin have to call on potentially, they've got McCaffrey to call on, obviously, who's going to be a bit of a game breaker in that last 10 minutes, and he's a guy that you just don't want to see. I think what Dublin have managed to do this year is they have really focused on the different stages of the game, within the game, right? So in other words, they know where they need to be 35, 40 minutes. They then know that first 10 minutes of the second half, who we need to have on the pitch and what we're doing in those first 10 minutes. And then they absolutely know who they want to have on the pitch in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And regardless, I think, if McCaffrey is 100%, because he obviously is fit, they're saying to themselves, no, his ability in that last 15 minutes to stretch things and to really open up the game is what we need. And I think that's why they probably hold the Kilkenny back to a certain degree. And then, you know, an Odell is very, very important to him. You see him, he's kind of released him as I said, he's that kind of minimum figure who will just get the ball and just go at you and stretch you. And then, of course, they've Dean Rock, they've a couple of other guys, they've Murphy to bring on, who also can attack from the back. So I just think they have a stronger bench, and I think they have more options off the bench.
For all of that, like, it feels like Kerry over the last couple of years are a coming force, right? Like, they've come and they've proven to do it, and it looks like that group will be around for a little while to come. It's hard to say the same thing about Dublin, even though, like, obviously the changes over the last 12 months, the players that have come back in, Tommy was making the point about on the football pod about the 2019 replay and the distinct lack of changes to the 15s now, which is remarkable. Normally there's a good turnaround, and he was saying there was like one or two players on either side. You have the new water boy that they have, and you have all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But it feels like where Kerry are sort of headed in that direction. Is it a bit of a last sting for this Dublin group?
Yeah, I think we discussed this the last day. I think it is. Like, if you tear potentially Cluxton, McCarthy, Fitzsimons, possibly Kilkenny. If you tear that 4, McCaffrey, 5 out of that's a very hard 5 to replace. You don't replace that too easily.
No.
And I think the sense has been that it is the number 9. It's all of that. It's the history. It's what we can do as a group. I think Farrell has to be given an awful lot of credit for what he
doesn't get
done.
much, does he?
No, he doesn't.
Pat Gilroy comes back in, and I saw Brawley saying during the week, listen, he's brought the fizz back. Poor old Desi can't get a break.
Exactly. He can't get a break. And by the way, if you go back and you roll your memory back to the COVID situation and the whole thing with the training, and you go back to that whole and then the Cluxton thing, I think Desi has earned massively the trust of those players, and I think it's a little bit lazy to kind of say, they're just playing for the 9 in a row. I think they're genuinely playing for Desi. I think they are genuinely playing for the manager and the management team, and I think they believe in it. I would question if they believed it a couple of years back, but I think there is an absolute. I think what they've realised is, this guy is a fella who we can trust, and this guy is a manager who has actually stood by us. Like, he never threw anyone under the bus. He took that all on himself that time, right? The Cluxton thing was completely. He basically stayed stum about it. He said, "Look, he'll come back when he's ready." And he has never, as I say, he's had fellas in and out. The McCaffrey thing was well handled, and then the Cluxton thing this year was brilliantly handled. How he came back. So I think he has done an absolutely remarkable job. I think he's done a brilliant job to lower expectations coming into this, because do you remember the drive for 5, the da-da-da, like, there was constant talk about all of this, whereas it's nearly like a sideshow a little bit. It's like a sub story. So I think he's done a brilliant job, and the Gilroy thing, whether it was a ploy to kind of deflect a bit more attention, it has worked. Because, as you say, everyone's saying, "Oh, Jesus, Pat Gilroy's." He's the difference.
The Merishka.
But it shows a lack of ego and stuff as well, obviously, on Desi's part, that, like, I don't mind that, that Leo Cullen, Stuart Lancaster thing, if we're succeeding, then who cares who gets the credit? Like,
Adrian, it's one of the hardest things, I think, in management, is the fact that people who can actually go, you know what, here, take the reins a little bit, and to delegate. It is, and it's not even. It is an ego thing to a certain degree, but it's also a control thing, which is a massive factor in it, and it's also a thing of how will I be perceived by the players if I do this? If I step back a bit and bring someone else in, do the players look at me as weak now? Do they look at me? So there's an awful lot. And by the way, to bring a personality, because to be fair, like, Gilroy is a big man in every respect. He commands presence. So when he comes into a situation like that, you have to be very careful. I think he's done a really, really good job. And as you say, I don't think he's got the credit for what he's done.
Did you hear him on the Free State podcast, the Brawley and Dean Fanning podcast?
I missed that. I heard it was very good.
Well, worth check. I shouldn't be sending people to podcasts that are not our own, but it's a great insight into the man. There's one story which you'll definitely appreciate about him walking into the head office of one of the big four, big five, whatever the hell they are in New York. Himself and Brawley one day, and I'll leave you to pick up the story there. But it's well worth. Gives you a great insight into
character. Just looking at and Tommy Rooney put this to Jack O'Connor during the week. Dublin have improved on that semi-final last year. When you look at the team, even Evan Comerford was in goals for a start. Now you have Stephen Cluxton, the experience there. The front six for Dublin last year, you had Bugler, Howard, Kilkenny, Costello, Rock, O'Dell. So there are slight differences, certainly, in variations in that six that will be this Sunday compared to last year. The Cluxton impact and him not being involved this year and being involved on Sunday, how big is that? Because Kerry have to plan differently.
I haven't looked too closely at the kick-out, but I did see someone saying that that Monaghan forced him out to his left a lot of times, which okay, I don't think really Cluxton gets too confused or too worried whether he has to go left, right, short. It doesn't faze him, right? He's that type of an individual. Process driven, knows what he does, good shot stopper, very, very good under the high ball. We know all of those things, but I think he brings a calm as well. I'm not saying Evan Comerford, by the way, because Evan Comerford is an absolutely top-class goalkeeper. And by the way, it's old poor old O'Hanlon, who did unbelievably well during the league. So there's an absolute kind of it's a position where they're richly served, but I think he gives that full back line an awful lot of comfort, especially with anything over the top. So you can manage to mark from side by side to out in front. You know that if it's going over top, he will have absolutely no problem coming to get it, and more than likely he will come and grab it, right? So he plays outfield, he's well able to do all that. His restarts, all those different things, 100%. The lack of goals that have gone in against them this year, they have massively tightened up as a defence. And their whole idea now, well, predominantly, is that really quick break. Now, I think where Derry slightly, if you go, there's a really, really brilliant, I think if you watch the last 5 minutes of the first half, Derry Kerry, and the first 5 minutes, you will actually see a stark difference in the intensity in Derry. It's amazing to see. It's as if they said, right, what we're going to do second half is we're going to expect a kind of they're going to come back at us, and they kind of retreated back into their shell a bit. Now Kerry increased the intensity, absolutely, but there wasn't that same kind of, it wasn't manic, but there was a real pace and a real intensity and a real aggression to that first 35 minutes from Derry, and especially that last 5 or 10 minutes from Derry. And the McCaig thing, I think, gives you an insight, I think, into how they're going to play Clifford, because I think Dublin have to bring something slightly different to it. And that is going to be key to obviously Sunday.
How do you there's no point asking how do you mark Clifford, you can't really mark him, but how do Dublin prepare for him?
how do people collectively
Thankfully I do not. I remember we played Kerry in the, I think it was the 07, or it's that long ago now, semi-final, and I remember having actual I genuinely most of the time I used to sleep pretty well before games, but I don't think I slept a wink that night, because I was thinking of, there was Gooch, there was O'Sullivan, there was Ty Kennelly was in that panel, there was obviously, and I was just kind of thinking, who exactly are you going to get and how do you do it? And that is the horrible, when you're faced with a task and you know you're going to be one-on-one, it's there's no hiding place. And McCaig is a man who took it on his shoulders. He conceded 8 or 9 or whatever it was. In hindsight, you probably look back and go, that's not a bad haul, to be honest with you.
And he got an early yellow as well. Clifford got one back.
Early. But I think, and Derry showed it a little bit, and I think Dublin will probably look at it on the video and say, oh, okay. Do you remember a couple of times? Remember Clifford was done for the shoulder. He was back in his defence. He ended up back in the defence once or twice, maybe more than that, but really impacting the ball, because McCaig just decided to go forward. He just bombed forward and he brought him up with him. That's you can do that a couple of times if you're one-on-one, but eventually what Clifford will nearly let you, and he'll just let someone else tag you. I think the only way to pull him back consistently is to change the markers on him. So, for example, Fitzsimons is on him, right? If the ball breaks, then someone else tags with him, Davy Byrne, and he goes. Yeah. So he's forcing him all the time. So there's confusion as is to, well, Aidan or Adrian, you take him if he goes. But now it's like, oh, Davy Byrne's gone. Who's on him? So, and I think then what Dublin have to do is they have to reward that guy with the ball when he goes up the pitch. In other words, that fella has to make an impact when he goes up. He can't just jog up or go down the sideline, because Clifford will just say, right, exactly. He has to make an impact when he goes up. And by the way, they have that with Gannon. Potentially Merchant. Davy Byrne's well able to go up. Fitzsimons is still even well able to go up and impact the ball. And I think that's the only way to try to impact, because you can't leave him up there and kind of say, or else you do what Cork do and they put a +1 in front of him. And I don't think Dublin will do that.
You're not?
No, I don't think they will. I think they'll have Howard back, you know, with the idea of, well, I'm going to cover this space off. And I think John Small, I don't think John Small will drop off. I think John Small will just will one-on-one on Seanie O'Shea, and I think he's done pretty well on O'Shea in the past, and I think he'll just say, well, I'm going to take him out, you guys look after him here behind. And I think what they'll probably do is, the Gannon thing could be interesting. I think Paddy will obviously demand, so will they? I'd say they'd probably talk about Merchant with Paddy, and they'll just stick Merchant on him and say, right, you're just following him everywhere, and put him on the back foot. But I think they might do a little bit of a panel on Clifford, more so though when they have the ball, if you get me.
Would Kerry not bite your arm off for that now? They're going to leave you one-on-one, and that'll be in rotation. But we're going to concede a couple of points from that, because it's going to create a bit of confusion. But you are going to be one-on-one, and Clifford will score it whatever way you want. If he's one-on-one, I
think they will. But I think the issue is, and this is the issue, and Derry obviously looked at this long and hard, as have other teams. When you put that extra man with him, right, it just opens up the spots for the other players. Now, our Kerry, you know, I flipped during the Derry game, and I was kind of saying, you know, McCaig needs a dig out here. He needs someone else, because it was so evident that obviously it was all about Clifford that day, so you needed somebody else. They had the other matchups okay, but what happens is it's kind of like a weed. You knock that one down, next thing the other one sprouts up. Correct, yeah. So, but does Gainey, I think, has been kind of blown hot and cold, but is that the fact because he is being marked specifically, and if all of a sudden you decide to rotate his man, that he all of a sudden gets 3 or 4 points, and he adds in 3 or 4 on top of the 7 or 8 that Clifford will inevitably get. Now you're at 12. And they stick a goal in. So I think it's kind of, you have to say, we are going to do a little bit of rotation. I think that there's not going to be a whole pile of rotation. I think it'll be between Mick Fitz and Davy Byrne. But I think what it'll be is they're going to try to get him, as I said, on the back foot and get him going forward. And I think Kerry will be wary of that because of Dublin's pace coming out of defence.
And funny, we had said it was Mick Fitz that generally speaking picked Clifford up last year in that semi-final, and like we said, look, if you keep him to 7 or 8 points, you're doing well. Clifford last year in that semi kicked 6 points, 4 from play, 1 free, 1 mark, which isn't a bad return for someone marking David Clifford, I guess.
Well, I think if you keep it in single figures, you're doing well. You know, because well, that's it. You know, I think you are, because I look around the rest of the team and I go, are the rest of them going to get 9 scores?
Do they have an over-reliance?
Get 9 points?
Is there an over-reliance on Clifford and O'Shea from Kerry's perspective?
Well, there is, but they're 2 of the best forwards in the country, so I'll take that over-reliance. I wouldn't mind having them.
That's the thing. One of the greatest footballers of all time, you're going to be trying to make use of as best you can. Will they be wanting to get, you mentioned about the clean sheet stuff, is it 8 or 9 games now? I see John Fogarty every game is tweeting that he's reached such a landmark of clean. Will that be in their mind that we'll need a goal here at some point?
I think they will, because of the way Dublin it's funny, everyone thought the last day Kerry Derry would be a bore fest and would be, and I think we had 6 goal chances in the first 7 or 8 minutes. It was just bananas. And it was also due to the pace that people were attacking and the willingness to get in behind. And I think that is a big thing. I think that, a lot, Gavin White and also O'Shea needs massive credit for what they're doing from a Kerry point of view. You know, they Morley and the rest of these guys keep the house clean, and they just get up front and they cause mayhem as well. Okay, so you know they can pick off scores, but I think they realise, and of course you have to realise, and this is, I think, is another trap that Derry fell into, where they failed to get the ball to McGuigan in that second half enough. You know, you could see him crying out sometimes, especially when Lynch came up. Remember, he got blocked 2 or 3 times. You get the ball to your most dangerous man, and you continue to get the ball to your most dangerous man, whether he's 1 man on him, 2 men on him, or 3 men on him. You get that ball to him because he will make decisions, and Clifford has the awareness, he has the ability, and he has the skill set to change his mind instantly and to change what he's doing with the ball instantly. So all of a sudden you think actually he's going to probably go for his own score, and then he's pinging a pass 30 or 40 yards. It is going to be, I think, Dublin, I think, Adrian, to go back to your point, I think Dublin will never shirk from that type of a challenge. I think for them to say, okay, we're going to put 2 or 3 guys beside, I think that would be a slight, nearly a bowing down to Kerry, and I don't think that would be in their psyche coming into this
DNA
game. You know, I just don't think it would be, and I don't think it's in the psyche of this particular team. So I think they'll say, Mick Fitz, you did a hell of a job on him before. We trust you to do it again. No bother to you, and we'll also give you we'll give you a hand when he receives it. Just hold him up that first time, and we'll get players.
What did McManus get the last day?
I must have got 3 or 4. I think from play,
Fitzsimons,
which is not bad again.
We're talking about a player who's maybe reaching the end of his inter-county career. Jesus, like he did a good job on him. Like
probably got 5 or 6 overall, including frees. But like that's again, that's not bad for.
Yeah, he did. I think Fitzsimons did a very good job on him. We were talking about this in that first 40 minutes. I thought he blunted him to a large degree. I thought from 50 minutes on, McManus really came alive, and I really do. I think. You know, he has that. Look, it's an awful lot of the time it's the unseen stuff as a defender, right? Just stuff you don't see in TV, where a player looks up to give the pass, and next thing you're reading it, and he has to change his mind and go back. There's, so 7 times that could happen, and then the one ball goes in, Clifford gets it and bangs it over the bar, and you say, "Geez, Mick Fitz is under pressure," but he's actually after cutting out 6 or 7 balls. So he is very, very good at that. You know, he is, and he's very sticky, and he's also a guy that believes in himself, and he won't drop the head.
Bit of cuteness about him as well. Like you can see him against McManus, but there's that disparity in size. You need a bit of
absolutely, and I think there is obviously that little bit of disparity because Clifford on most defenders will have that edge. So I think, look, do they rely on him? Paddy, I think Paddy has struggled, I feel, to remove the shackles of a really tight, sticky defender. Yeah. I think he has. I think his idea, which was probably something where he would drop really deep, and that's what sometimes fellas do, and then try to get the ball as he meanders back up the pitch. Fellas are realising that and saying, actually, we just tag him all the way. We'll just go with him all the way. Yeah. So even if he drops back into his own 21, we pick him up there. And Merchant will have no issue with that. And Merchant will run all day. And Merchant will put him under pressure. So I think that kind of, if you're rating that one, you're kind of saying, Paddy has to. Now, what to do? They might just leave Paddy inside. Yeah. I say, well, actually, don't worry about it, Paddy. You go inside and we'll throw. Because I think Kerry have to throw something different. They can't just say, okay, it's going to be Davy against the rest. Yeah, they have to give them something different to think about. And I don't think you can necessarily do it with Geaney. You can't do it with Spillane, right, or O'Brien. So you need to do it with Seanie O'Shea, Clifford, or Seanie O'Shea or Paddy. One of the big ones. They're your 2 boys that you need to throw something different at it.
Discipline is going to be important as well. I presume David Goff's role will be heavily weighted as well, because
at last a Meath man appeared at Croke Park and All Ireland final day.
Good slaying.
Although, to be fair,
but both Dermot O'Connor, like Kerry and Dermot O'Connor, and Dublin and Niall Scully both had black cards in their semi-finals as well, which you probably can't afford either of them to do again this weekend. So it's little silly things maybe that
it's silly. Correct, it's silly things, and by the way, it does put you under massive pressure. We saw, obviously, as you say, O'Connor in the Derry game, and how much Brendan Rodgers made hay at that time. It's going to be, I think Goff will hopefully let it flow. I really hope he will, because it needs to be let flow. There's so, the game has become so fast and so skillful and so athletic that there's no more of these. There's no more dirt, shall we say?
He says with a twinge of regret.
Sadness in the eyes.
There's no presence anymore. But it is happening in at massive pace. I think his officiating of that Clifford that will be interesting. Because as a referee, I can imagine you go in, and no matter what you say, your mind is coloured somewhat with the idea that, well, I am probably officiating against the greatest player that we've seen, and therefore he will be getting extra, give him something kind of deep. So even though you don't want to keep your eye on it, you're probably watching it a lot. And again, Dublin will probably play a few mind games to try to aid that. But look, Kerry are well adept at doing that, and Derry people would say that McGuigan got a bit of close contact in the last day. But it's I think the officiating will hopefully balance itself out. I think the free taking and all of that will be a big thing, and I think Costello has been very, very good for Dublin. I think he's been one of Dublin's shining lights, and you mentioned that team. Like, if you think of a full forward line, which I would expect it to be, which would be Costello, O'Callaghan and Mannion, I think potentially Pascal comes out to that 11 role to create a bit of mayhem. That depends if he has trained well and if he hasn't, the head hasn't dropped too much in the last few weeks. And then I think Scully will retain his spot. I think he got an injury prior to that black card, and he just seemed out of sorts, and as soon as he came on, they whipped him off. So I think he will retain his spot, and I think Howard will be on the other side, and I think that's your 6, and I think they will keep Kilkenny in reserve. I could be completely wrong. Paddy Small will obviously be there. There's a lot of impact there to come on for Dublin. I just feel there's a bit more, and I think if they keep it tight, I think that last 10 minutes is going to be where Dublin potentially stretch ahead.
In a word, prediction, I was chatting to Mike Frank Russell yesterday, and his word back to me was replay. So how are you calling it?
Do they even do replays anymore?
There's no
final only.
Only for the final. They'll do extra time. And then
CPA put the end to that.
Who and by how many points?
I think Dublin by 2.
Okay, interesting.
Thanks. I'll carry
that. It'll all start in the YouTube comments.
Exactly.
But there's always
DMs are open.
So don't worry about it.
There's the call out from Anthony Moyles. Anthony, great stuff as always. Thanks for hopping in.